Welcome, everyone. Tonight is February 25th, 2021. It's 7 p.m. This is the Prince Frederick Town Center Master Plan Update Workshop. I'm Steve Jones, the Chair of the Calvert County Planning Commission. I want to welcome Maria Bueller, Vice Chair. Welcome, Maria. Thanks for being here tonight. And now I'm going to turn it over to the Director of the Calvert County Planning and Zoning Department, Mary Beth Cook. Mary Beth, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Planning Commissioner Jones. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for taking your time out of your busy schedule to join us tonight for this workshop. I'm Mary Beth Cook, Director of Planning and Zoning. I'm going to read some rules for our workshop this evening. Calvert County government staff appreciates your attendance and welcomes your input this evening. The workshop is being streamed live on the Calvert County government website, Calvert County Facebook page, Comcast Channel 6, and HD 1070. During the workshop, participants will break into groups. Each group will receive the same activity to work on as a group. Please help keep the group focused on the preset activity. Please be courteous of other opinions and thoughts. Be brief with your comments while in the group setting. Allow others to contribute. Everyone has the right to be heard and to provide their feedback. No signs, posters, or visual background messages may be displayed during tonight's workshop. At the end of the scenario planning exercise, the breakout groups will reconvene as a large group so highlights can be shared. Each group scenario will be posted to the Town Center Master Plan Update webpage and shared with the Calvert County Planning Commission at its meeting on March 17th. Please be courteous of other speakers, refrain from clapping, cheering, or jeering, or other disruptions, loud noises, or anything that contributes to an intimidating atmosphere. Participating county staff are subject matter experts charged with carrying out the operations of county government on behalf of the Board of County Commissioners. Staff does not set policy. We ask that attendees be mindful that staff and consultants are here to provide insight into the master plan update and will not engage in political dialogue. Thank you, and I hope you enjoy our workshop. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Jenny Plummer. Welcome.
Good evening, everyone. I'm so glad you could join us. I am broadcasting live from the Calvert Commissioners Hearing Room at the Courthouse in Prince Frederick. This evening, we will be joined by several planning and zoning staff, along with our consultant staff, to facilitate our breakout groups. We have facilitators, in addition to myself, Paul Conover, Tamara Blake Wallace, Rachel O'Shea, DeCarlo Brown, and from our consultant team, Jamie Kendrick of Sabra Associates, a Mead Hunt Company, Matthew Fitzsimmons, Josh Coulson, and Eric Weber. In addition, we could not do this without the communications and media relations staff of Kevin Schmidt, Daryl Baxter, and Terrell Gross. At this point, I'd want to note that we have, many of you have been with us since the beginning of the kickoff meeting back in January 2020. And from there, we want to welcome anyone who is new. That if this is your first time attending, that's great. I do know we have several scouts and a Cub Scout joining us this evening, so a warm welcome to you. At this point, I'd like to, before we get into the slides, turn it over to Scarlett to give some, our hostess for the evening, and we really could not do it without her, is Scarlett Sutton, and she'll be giving some tips on Zoom. So just a moment. Scarlett, it's your turn.
Thank you, Jenny. I'm Scarlett Aller-Sutton. I work with Calvert County Planning and Zoning, and like Jenny said, I will be hosting and moderating. As Jenny stated, the meeting is being recorded and live streamed on both video and audio. Please also keep yourself muted, not just when the presenters are speaking, but during the breakout groups when you're not speaking. When you're ready to speak, you can mute and unmute yourself by using the buttons on the toolbar in the bottom left of your screen. You can also mute and unmute yourself using keyboard shortcuts. On Windows, press Alt-A, or if you're on Mac, press Command-Shift-A. If you'd like to interrupt when someone else is speaking during the breakout groups, you can use the raise hand function. It will notify the facilitator that you're ready to speak. Then they can call on you. If you're on a computer, you can raise and lower your hand by going to the participants menu. You can also raise and lower your hand by using keyboard shortcuts. On Windows, press Alt-Y, or on Mac, press Option-Y. Last housekeeping note, if you could please say your name every time you speak so our hosts can better keep track of who's speaking and we can avoid people talking over each other. Let's get started.
Why, thank you, Scarlett. At this point, we'll go to the slides. So if we could go to the next slide. This is our agenda for this evening. I'm finishing up the welcome, introductions, and protocol and going into the presentation. So if we could go back to the agenda for the moment. After I do some brief introduction slides on the background, Jamie will be taking on the presentation on the planning concepts, and then we'll be moving into the breakout session, the scenario planning. And then later we will reconvene and review the discussion. And then I will come back and talk about next steps. And Mr. Jones will join us for the adjournment. So if we can move on to the next. Next slide, please. So the Planning Commission in fall 2019 agreed and approved a 3-phase process for updating the town center master plans. Prince Frederick is the first plan to be updated since the 2019 comprehensive plan was adopted. Those three phases are to identify issues, develop the plan, and then do the adoption. So we wrapped up the identify issues. We hosted the November 19th workshop. We have been directed to the Planning Commission to proceed to the second phase, which is develop the plan. Staff will be coming up with the first draft and we'll be holding public meetings on that draft. The comments that we receive will be provided to the Planning Commission for their consideration, at which point the Planning Commission will create its own draft for public hearing. After the comments are received, the Planning Commission considers those. They will work on preparing a recommended plan for the county commissioners. And the commissioners will then hold a public hearing, at least one, before considering it for adoption. Once we're more into the actual plan, the zoning staff will be working on the zoning ordinance update. We could proceed to the next slide. We kicked off last year in January with a liaison meeting. The liaisons were very interested in reaching out to the youth to make sure they were involved in this update process. So we're very glad that the Scouts are joining us this evening. Then we did a public meeting in January in person prior to COVID, where we did the overview of the process and also asked people what issues were most important to them. We had a survey, both hard copy and digital. And then we came back in March and presented those results at a workshop. That was in person at the college. And then we followed that up with a survey. And then due to COVID, we were delayed a bit, but came back on October 15th for a welcome back meeting and to give an update on where we were. And then we did an interactive survey, which Mead Hunt created, which was a map where people could identify issues in Prince Frederick, primarily on transportation, pedestrian, bicycling, and such. And then we hosted the November 19th workshop, which many of you did attend. Thank you. Next slide. I would like to recognize Daryl Baxter, who you see in many of these videos. He did short minute and a half videos on focusing on various transportation issues, thanks to Tamara Blake Wallace and Ruth Davis Rogers for working on those. And I believe we had at least one of our interviewees that is here this evening. So thank you, Daryl. And if you haven't seen them, these are posted to the county's Facebook page, also the YouTube site. And I believe all but maybe the 5th one is up on our Town Center page. And the 5th one will be updated shortly. On to the next slide, please, which I believe I turn it over to Jamie at this point. Jamie?
All right, good evening, everybody. It's good to be back. Hopefully we are nearing a time when we can all be together again and do some of these exercises live and in person. I know we're all anxious for that. So I think what we'd like to do tonight is to start off talking about some of the strategic choices that need to be made in a master plan, a town center master plan. And then we'll share what we shared with and the Planning Commission acknowledged at their last meeting. And then we'll walk through a couple of scenarios of what development could look like in the future. And then we'll go to an exercise where all of you can share your perspectives. And I'm going to try and keep my part to about 10 to 15 minutes at the most. Somebody referred to me earlier today as loquacious, which I think means that I talk a lot. So feel free to wave your hands at me and tell me to stop if I go on too long. So when I do plans, town center master plans, corridor plans, I like to put some guardrails to it. So that's what we've started to do here. And I'm going to work at the back and then come to the front. Not every public space can be great, but all public spaces should be accessible. Not every area can be developed, nor every area preserved. Not every intersection can operate without congestion, nor every intersection be walkable. And not every cost can be borne by the taxpayer, nor by the developer. So that's kind of the lens that we start with here, is that we have to make choices as we do planning exercises, whether you're doing, a plan to renovate your house and you have to decide which is more important, putting money into the kitchen or the bathroom, or whether we're doing a town center master plan where we have to decide, what land should be developed and which land should be preserved and where the community center should go and what roads are needed. There's only so many resources out there, be they natural, financial, or human. And we've got to allocate them as best we can. And we all bring our own values to that. One of the two big values that started out in the comprehensive plan and go back 50 years in Calvert County is that there is a deep belief in preserving the environmental resources, the farms, the forests that make Calvert County such a great place to live. And on the other side of that, or maybe it's the same side, depending on your perspective, is that we ought to focus our growth on town centers. Prince Frederick, Dunkirk, St. Leonard, Lusby, Solomons, I'm missing one. And we ought to focus our growth there and try and make those town centers kind of great places to live, work, and play to the extent that we can. But again, not everything can be great, right? Not every intersection can work ideally. Not every park can be beautiful, but many can if we prioritize things. So the comp plan recognized that the town center concept really hadn't gotten as much momentum as had the farm and forest land agricultural preservation over the past 30 years or so. And so that's why we're here tonight, is to focus on the town center master plan and to see what we can't do to put some turbocharge, not necessarily into the total amount of growth, but in terms of how we prioritize and invest in town centers. So we presented to the Planning Commission kind of 4 important choices that we asked be recognized in this plan. And the first one is the one we're going to talk to tonight, which is kind of identifying development areas that get us to that sense of place. And we don't, as we go further in the plan, we don't want to sprinkle and spread investments, and requirements equally among all places, because that really doesn't get us anywhere, right? If we want to get to a sense of place, if we want to get to some focus, we have to focus, right? And so that's part of what we're going to try and do with this town center master plan. The second choice, and 2, 3, and 4 we will come to in the next phase as we start to draft the plan, is that the master plan and zoning regs should take a holistic approach to balancing development rights, regulatory and design requirements, taxes, fees. Everything that we kind of stir into the pot about how land gets developed needs to be balanced. In some areas, we may be more focused on ag preservation, even within the town center. And in some areas, we may want to incentivize people to build senior housing. And each of those has its own different economics and market realities, their own design needs, infrastructure needs, and we need to balance all of those and not just kind of ratchet up pressure on developers or put all the burden on existing residents. We need to figure out what strike the right balance in doing that. At the same time, we should know that there is a role for developers and others to play in developing the infrastructure that is needed. But we really ought to be prioritizing connectivity within and among the neighborhoods of the town center over the mainline transportation capacity. So we can build more roads, build more roads, build more roads, and that's all kind of well and good. But we're really trying to use this plan to foster connections within the town center. We can't assume, though, that government can do everything. Government can't build every road, can't afford to build every road, right? Can't afford to build every bike path, every sidewalk. Again, there's a balance to be done here. And finally, and my favorite, don't avoid difficult issues. When I do a plan, I like to do a plan, right? It's not, that old, what was it? Garrison Keillor, all the children are above average, all the trees are green, all the air is clean, right? Sometimes we have to take on difficult issues, wrestle them to the ground, and put responsibilities where they can best be used to achieve our end. So we're going to try as we go through this and encourage the Planning Commission to, really wrestle with these choices and present real recommendations to the Board of County Commissioners, and we'll see where we end up. And some of these aren't going to be easy. So, all of that said, when we looked at the existing town center master plan, and a lot of this is based on the Charette report that was done back in 2013, we looked at the existing master plan and zoning regulations. The master plan never really, the Charette never really got fully translated into a town center master plan, which is partly what brings us here today. To the extent that the town center master plan does define and guide development, there are these 9 development districts: the entry district coming from the north, the forest district, Old Town residential. But when we looked into the zoning code and what was permitted and not permitted and what requirements existed and didn't exist, we found that there was not huge distinction between them. And so we tried to figure out whether there needed to be a huge distinction among them. And I think we've arrived at the notion that there probably doesn't need to be in a formal way development districts called out, but that we can get there through other means. Second, as described in the comp plan, there is this phase 1 and phase 2 of the town center expansion. And when you read the comp plan and you lay it up against a map, the comp plan doesn't really describe the phase 1 and phase 2 in a temporal way, meaning you can't build here till you build there, or you can't build this until you build that. What the comp plan says is that you have to have a transportation plan. It says you have to have an adequate public facilities review. It says you have to look at the water sewer infrastructure and a couple of other kind of policy and planning documents to support growth everywhere, frankly, not just in this kind of phase 1 area or phase 2 area. So the way that we're looking at the comp plan going forward is that we want to get the whole plan figured out. And then if there needs to be triggers or incentives or requirements, we can figure that out. But let's start by figuring out the entirety of what we would like the town center to look like. And then as we wrap up the plan, we can figure out what those incentives or triggers or other policy changes might be. Okay. And I'm getting ready to turn it over to Matthew Fitzsimmons in a second. So the approach, just focusing on phase 1 here, the approach is let's establish 2 or 3 key areas for high quality development, public investment, and targeted redevelopment. Regardless of whether they are phase 1 or in a phase 2, right? Let's find those places where it makes sense to develop that stronger sense of place. Some places means we might downzone them down the line. Some places it means we might increase the zoning density. In the end, we want to kind of balance it all out, but we want to have some focus to this. And then the third piece is we want to encourage a mix of uses especially in these node areas. So along 2-4, kind of around the courthouses, near the college. But we also don't want to be artificial and say, oh, you can only build 12 units of housing if you build 50,000 square feet of retail, because that ends up kind of distorting the market and leaving lots of empty spaces that never really do get developed as we want. So we want to encourage the mix of uses, but not set kind of artificial conditions on doing so. What we want to focus on is the built form, making sure that buildings have the right look and feel to create that sense of place. So that's the kind of broad brush approach. And now what we're going to do in just a moment is share 3 scenarios. And I think what I would, just one other thing to point out about this, because people are going to say, well, this scenario is to create 1,000 units or 10,000 units. I think what matters more than what a plan can allow, right, is what the market will bear and provide. So even if we were to allow 100,000 new units of development, if the market can only build 800 over the next 2 years, 10 years, 20 years, that's all the market can bear. And the zoning and the land use has some influence over that, but it's not the driving factor. So if you see something that's higher than you might like or lower than you might like, know that in many respects kind of comes out in the wash when people go to invest to build a house, a shop, an office building or what have you. So just you have to bear in mind that it is as much the market and people's desire to develop their land and to buy the land as it is kind of what the land use is permitting. So with that, let me turn it over to Matthew Fitzsimmons, who will talk about the land use types you're going to see in the scenarios and the scenarios themselves.
Great, thanks, Jamie. And so I'm kind of excited to present these diagrams to everyone. I'll explain a little bit about how we started and the methodology that we had. But I also think this is kind of a good start for our exercise in a few minutes that Jamie's going to take over the mic again and kind of explain that process as well. So in front of us tonight here on this slide are kind of the pieces that of land use elements that we were looking at. These are kind of visual cues to how we would envision certain land uses, residential predominantly, as well as some non-residential or mixed use characteristics. Again, as Jamie described earlier, some of the densities that you'll see in our diagrams in the analysis, again, it's kind of up to that level of intensity or density. Doesn't necessarily mean a project or all of the town center could actually achieve that density, but that's kind of a kind of theoretical threshold in these studies. So I'm going to go quickly just across the top. Again, you will be using certain densities that are described already in the zoning ordinance, and so we kind of use that language again here to help us get through this exercise. So in the top left is traditional suburban. Again, this is up to 4 units to the acre. Doesn't necessarily mean you have to build 4 dwelling units to the acre. It could be less than that. But the idea here is that it's predominantly a single family development in a kind of a fashion that you see here, kind of smaller lots clustered together. And moving across the top, suburban village, up to 14 dwelling units. Again, doesn't mean we have to max that out all the way. Again, site constraints and things of that nature would play into the level of intensity. But in general, what we envision here are perhaps a mix of townhouses, or in this case, a view, kind of smaller multifamily buildings that are spread out, but have a certain level of street presence and street characteristics to it. And then to the far right, we're looking at commercial core, and here it's kind of an updated view of what might happen in certain areas that's single story, single use. But ideally, I think what we took from the design shred are creating these commercial areas that also invest in people places, places to dine, places to congregate, as well as just to meet the daily needs of users. And then perhaps throughout, I'm moving down to the bottom right, are small nodes where commercial activity might happen. It's not a complete strip center or commercial district, but little nodes that can be placed within a residential setting that could help pick up the residential architecture and the language of the surrounding community. And then I'm going to jump all the way to the far lower left. And then we're looking at mixing of uses. And mixing of uses we'll talk about in this presentation can come in various ways, horizontal or vertical. In the case here, we're looking at up to 14 dwelling units to the acre. So we might have a kind of town setting feeling that is maybe 2 to 3 stories, ground floor uses, and but limiting that density to about 14 units to the acre. And then also what's in the, if you're familiar with the zoning ordinance, currently there's certain areas in the town center that allow up densities up to 24 units. So giving you a visual cue to what that could look like, 4 stories of maybe residential over top of retail on the ground floor. So that's what you might expect with that kind of density. So let's go to our first concept. And our first concept, excuse me, really took a lot of cues from the existing conditions that are happening in the town center today. We're generally not trying to kind of change the residential pattern there. We did acknowledge that there's an importance to Maryland Route 2-4 going north-south through the town center. And we saw that as, how do we preserve and maybe enhance the commercial use along there? And again, that's kind of looking at that image that we saw on the previous slide, the 1-story integrated kind of commercial uses that could fit into the neighborhood, but also, connect residential communities on the outside out back into that corridor. Again, we're not, where concept A deviates from the design shred, if you were familiar with the design shred from years back, we're not really in this model, we're not proposing necessarily encouraging mixed uses. Within this area, again, we're trying to keep the commercial uses as kind of a single story use along the corridor and then transitioning to residential around it. Again, generally in the east side of the town center, we're looking at residential densities up to 14 units to the acre. And then as we progress to the edge, to the east, to the west, and to the south, we transition back down to a lesser density, looking at that traditional suburban look, where it's about 4 units to the acre. You'll also see on these slides, we put some dots in there. I think these are ideas about where we could strategically place age-restricted housing in the southeast corner near the historic core of Prince Frederick, near the courthouses, perhaps up north closer to the medical facilities, or central and west closer to the existing senior center, or perhaps next to the College of Southern Maryland. And again, the image of that minor commercial building, is the corner of the college an opportunity for that? And on this slide, it's the same plan, just we wanted to illustrate some of those elements in these areas. So if we did place senior housing close to the courthouse, we could do it in a way that's context sensitive, kind of fits into that kind of more traditional language. Again, looking at the commercial uses along the corridor, that image on the top right. And then again, within that kind of the orangier residential area where we're allowing up to 14 units to the acre, it could be kind of a town scale, multifamily, 3 stories, 4 stories, mixing in with townhouses to get that kind of diversity of housing, but keeping it at a scale that's very town and village oriented. And again, we're also noted in the plans, and it shows up on concept B here as well, that brown area is the historic Main Street area. And any opportunities we have to reinvest in that area should, enhance the sense of place in that area. So concept B we derived from, we took a lot of cues from the design shred. And in the design shred, they called out some strategic areas where some commercial properties could be encouraged to be redeveloped into a mixed use. And you see that in kind of these pinkish areas, generally falling to the east of Route 2-4 north of the Armory location, as well as looking at these crossroad connections where Dares Beach Road connects with Route 2-4, and then further south at Hollowing Point and Solomon's Island Road. And so in those areas, we mapped in 14 units to the acre. Remember that image earlier, and we'll see it in just a minute. And then one of the other components that the design charrette looked at is looking at a little bit more intensity and density closer to the college, trying to marry the opportunity of having multifamily perhaps close to the college to support faculty, students. And with that, is there an opportunity for the retail and the age restricted housing in that area? So what could some of these things look like? Again, if we push the mixed use density up to 14 units the acre, we might have something that looks like the top right image. And then, there are models of senior housing or age restricted housing that work very well with academic or college institutions, like the image in the lower left. And then again, some more images of what kind of a 14 unit to the acre look would be in the town center. It could be a really nice townhouse community that has street orientation, very walkable communities. And likewise, if we're thinking about adding that intensity or adding that layer of density to the historic area, this is an opportunity to reinforce kind of the streetscape and really carve out a setting that really enhances the public life, and using the investment of the public facilities to maybe create opportunities for placemaking and parks and that nature. Concept C, we are looking at kind of pushing the envelope of density, and we're looking at, instead of having more of a transition from the edge to the center, we're looking at the whole town center as one entity, and at the edge of the town center is where we might make that transition from town and village spirit to something that's more rural. And so in this model, we've allowed up to 14 units to the acre overall across the town center. And then we went back and looked at those kind of commercial cores along Route 2 and Route 4 and where some of the major corridors connect at Solomon's Island Road and Dares Beach Road. And we applied the upper level of density that's allowed in the zoning ordinance, but we applied it to these blobs and allowed it to go up to 24 units the acre. So these are where we would encourage much more intensive mixed use development in that area. And maybe if we go to the next slide, we can kind of take a look at what that would look like. So again, in those red areas of commercial activity, mixed use commercial activity, we might be able to look at kind of a vertical mixed use, 4 stories of residential over the ground floor. And then perhaps by the college, since we've allowed a little bit more density to happen around the college, maybe there's an opportunity for kind of a smaller scale mixed use building like the image in the lower left, which is from Princeton. And then, are there opportunities? The bottom right image is just really, giving us another example of how we might craft public space closer to the government buildings and the courthouses to really create more of a civic gathering space for all of the town center. So we've talked about all 3 various degrees of density. We've mapped them out side by side across the top here, A, B, and C. And what we want to do, this is not an exhaustive list of criteria of how one might look at the variations between A, B, and C, but these are some lenses to look at it by. So the first one is housing and lifestyle choice. As we go from A, which is our low density concept, to C, which is our higher density concept, there's more opportunity for different housing choices, mixing of multifamily with single family, housing that might be more specialized, like senior housing or housing for affordable housing. So when we have higher density, we have perhaps more opportunity to create more choices for people to meet their lifestyle needs. When it comes to mixed use orientation, of course, with the lower density, we tend to look more at a horizontal split. So you may have commercial on the corridor, but residential behind it. Doesn't mean it's not interconnected or related to each other. It's just done more horizontally. Whereas when we get to the density, to concept C, we can do this vertically because we have the economics of those those densities to support vertical mixing. When it comes to flexibility and innovative development opportunities, and what we mean by that is if we give more density to parcels, then a developer has more opportunity to think about housing choice, about integrating different perhaps non-residential uses with residential uses. So there's a little bit more flexibility and there's more innovation that can happen when we have more density to play with on a parcel. And then it's much lower when we're talking about only 4 units to the acre. It's much more difficult to create different types of housing opportunities or even non-residential opportunities. And then, of course, in the same kind of thinking, when we have more density, there's more households to support the goods and services. And so those houses can help offset the cost of providing the retail that was kind of viewed as important for kind of the town during the design shred. So of course, with concept C, we're calling it more abundant, but even in concept A, there's, it's adequate level to support amenities and services in the town center. And then we also wanted to look at the walk score with, more density. Tends to be more sidewalk infrastructure. People live closer to goods and services. So when we look at that, the walk score, which any neighborhood can Google their walk score and come up with a score. I don't exactly know all the criteria that go into it, but typically we find higher walk scores, more walkable communities where we have more mixing of uses and more denser communities. And so these are, 5 ways to look at it. There are probably 5 other ways to look at it, but I think this starts to set the stage of how we might have criteria to kind of assess A, B, and C in our conversations. And with that, I think this is kind of a primer for what's coming next. Jamie, you want to take it over and introduce our exercise?
Great. Well, here we are again. Thank you, Matthew. So let me just give everybody a chance to breathe for a second. We covered a lot there in 18 minutes, 19 minutes. So if you have, so we have some young people on the call today. So our scenario planning exercise may look somewhat familiar to them. Some of them might see it as Minecraft. I know that my son saw it as somewhere between Minecraft and the old Sim City that some of us played in our youth. But we're going to use this tool to develop your thoughts on how the town should grow and where investment should be over the course of the next 2 decades. And we have about half an hour and really would like for everybody to participate. And I'm going to do my best here to walk you through this exercise, realizing that I just missed something. So I'm going to move this over here and walk you through it. Okay. So you're going to start with this map here. I'll make it a little bigger. And each of these little green blocks represents an acre or 2 of land. Obviously, this is, not precise. And we have then on this right-hand side here, a list of the different land uses that we just talked about. So whether it's that kind of traditional suburban, up to 4 units per acre. Actually, let me pause right there. So these numbers up to 4, up to 14, recall in the current zoning code and going forward, there's this transfer of development rights program. So it's not just somebody could come in and build 4 or 14 units, right? Once you get past that first or second unit, there has to be married with an ag preservation component as well. So it's not just build. It's build, but give something towards the other half of the equation, which is farm and forest preservation. So just want to make sure we're clear about that. So you'll start with this Minecraft board here, and then your facilitator will, at your direction, cut and paste these different blocks into the various parts of the town. Hopefully I'm making this reasonably clear. And then as that occurs, this will populate over here to say, okay, if we put 4 of these blocks in the area over near the college, that will generate 16 houses, 20 houses, whatever it might be. Now, what you're going to find, I think, is that this actually adds up rather quickly. And you will not, unless you want to have low density everywhere, you will not be able to fill up all of the map. And that's kind of the idea, right? Is that we want to use the town center as a way to concentrate some of the growth and development, create that sense of place, and preserve as much farm and forest, even within the town center, as is possible. We don't want to consume every bit of land. So that's what we're trying to do. So each of the land uses we talked about are kind of over here. Each of the groups is going to be given a target number of dwelling units to place on the map, anywhere between, I think it's 800 and 1,400, depending on the group. And that is based on what we think the market can bear. Actually, all of the scenarios we developed thus far actually yield fewer units than under the current zoning. So actually, all of this is to some extent on a lesser scale than the existing zoning in the town center at this point. So that should kind of, I hope, give some comfort that we're actually, it may look like in certain places we're getting more dense, but overall it's kind of on the downward side. Okay, what other instructions did I want to give? So for the purpose of this exercise, don't get hung up on some of the externalities. Don't get hung up on traffic. Oh, if we build really dense here, then we'll need a new road there. Assume that, and it might be a stretch for some people, but assume that we will come in as part of the plan and put those additional roads there, or the intersection here, or come in and we'll put a piece of parkland there, or a playground here, or a new school there. So assume that this is just placing the dwelling units, and then as we progress through the plan process over the next couple of months, we would then come back in and place those other community facilities. Let's see, what else? So areas that are in this kind of light green, even though there may be houses there today, they are developable. Those houses would obviously still be there. That would likely never change. But for the purpose of this map, the light green is the developable areas. The dark green is your streams, stream valleys, forested areas, et cetera. Those are not developable. The brown areas are your existing major shopping centers, the hospital, the aquatic center, some of your existing retail. So I think you have like the Weiss is in here, and the Walmart is in here, and the Safeway is somewhere else. So you'll see some of that existing. Now, in some of the plans, we say, well, let's redevelop these areas, right? So there is some space that you could develop, in front or behind of those existing commercial shopping centers, but we leave some space there for the retail to remain. So I think I covered all of the notes. You have facilitators. So we'll go into breakout rooms. You'll have facilitators. Hopefully they'll be able to walk you through this a little bit better. And Jenny, unless there's anything else I missed?
No, I think you were good. At this point, I think Scarlett's going to explain the breakout rooms, and then we'll go right to the exercise.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jane.
As was stated, the next section will be in small groups. When I open the rooms in a few seconds, you might see a message asking if you'd like to join the room. When you go ahead and confirm that, it'll move you into your small group, where you and about 10 to 15 other participants will work with a staff member. We'll have about 30 minutes in those groups. When it's time to come back, you'll get a notification saying it's time to come back. You can either click on that button to return immediately, or you can stay in your room to finish the thought. At the end of the countdown timer, everyone will be returned to the main room and will reconvene as the whole group. All right, and we will be moving into the breakout rooms now. I understand there are a few people who may have registered a bit later who may not be assigned groups. If you'll stand by just a minute, I'll get you moved.
about our scenario that we have going on with the exercise. So with that, Jessica is going to share her screen and we'll get started with our exercise tonight.
Mute.
Okay.
There you
I'm
go.
Chris Banks, and I listened to Jenny present to the Historical Society Board of Directors. I guess it was last week, Jenny, that you were
Wednesday
there?
night, yes.
Right, exactly. And what's interesting is that I really live in Huntingtown, but because of a lot of damage to my house, I've been living at a hotel right here in Prince Frederick. And so sometimes my son has visited me, and as a result, we've walked Prince Frederick
Nice.
Main Street, and it was like he couldn't get over it. I mean, he was here as a teenager, but we were way over in Huntingtown or other areas, and so I learned to appreciate Prince Frederick Town Center.
Well,
Yeah.
very nice. Thanks for sharing that. Jacob, we'll go to you and then to Balin.
Hello, my name is Jacob. I don't really know how to say this, but yeah.
I believe, are you one of our scouts?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, fantastic. I believe, well, that's great. So we'll go from Balin to Jacob and then Jacob to Ron Clada. So Jacob, you'll need to unmute yourself.
Okay, did you hear me?
We do now, yes.
Okay, I don't really know how to say this, but my name is Jacob Fitzgerald, and
Where do you
I
live,
believe you're-
Jacob?
Yeah.
I live at Gate 3, and
Gate 3 in Scientist Cliffs, Park Republic.
Lexington Park.
Oh, well, fabulous. You're part of the Boy Scout troop, so welcome. And I believe from Jacob, we're going to Ron Clada. So Ron, you're up next, and then we'll go right to the map.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I'm Ron Claude. I live in the Hunters Ridge community, just about a mile due west of the Prince Frederick Town Center. I'm here kind of representing a couple of groups, I guess. The American Chestnut Land Trust that are the major protectors of the Parkers Creek watershed, the most pristine watershed, I think, in the whole county, maybe the whole western shore. But I'm also a member of the Friends of Hunting Creek, so I'm kind of representing that group as well. So I'm ready to roll.
Oh, fantastic. I just want to note that Steve Jones is here with us for a few minutes, and then Scarlett Aller, also Sutton. So at this point, I'm going to share my screen and we'll get started. As mentioned, well, now we did our introduction, so maybe about 25 minutes, but I think we should be good to go on our exercise. So just a moment. Sharing my screen. So this is kind of like Minecraft or perhaps SimCity, depending on what decade you are familiar with. So just to orient you, this is Maryland 2-4. I hope you can see my cursor moving. And then the courthouse is right here. And then we've got some shopping centers. So Prince Frederick Village, we've got the Safeway Shopping Center here. We've got the Giant up here, Market Square, Chick-fil-A, the library, and the hospital. So that kind of hopefully gives you just a brief, it's not an exact picture of Prince Frederick, it's a concept, but I would like to jump right in. And I'd like to ask, we'll start with Jacob. If you had an idea on what type of where you would want houses or maybe some commercial area, where would you select? And I'm going to start actually to give you some more of our instructions. We're looking at having a range of housing units from 1,250 to 1,300. And if I could start up here in the northeast quadrant of Prince Frederick. So Jacob, if you were king, or where would you put some development?
I would put development on the top right because where all on the bottom right, I would put like all the other things or like supplies, and I just think it'd be a better idea for like top right.
Okay. So that's sort of, I would say, kind of the perhaps neighborhood commercial with types of services and such. So top right, maybe around the hospital, perhaps here?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, well, good job. So at, where else? Balin, I'd like to go to you and then I'm going to go to Chris. So Balin, if you were looking to the future, where would you like to see either new houses or new commercial area or senior housing? Where would you suggest? You still with us? You're on mute.
Yeah,
There you
no,
go.
I'm just looking. I
Yes.
don't understand the map too much, but
So Maryland 24 is here.
Okay, so we can always come back.
Maybe
But,
up on that auto drive, like there's a big chunk of land there too by the bank.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe something's like a suburban village there.
I was just thinking the same thing. Boy, I like you. This is Charlene again.
I know, Charlene, I like your ideas too. Let's plan together.
Okay, so we want to add some suburban village in that area, and that's 14 units, dwelling units per acre.
Is and where the library is, and how that is constructed today. You can see that there's not just one big expanse of parking. There are commercial buildings everywhere in that shopping center on one portion, and then the other portion there is a bunch of parking. That also is a possibility as well.
Well, no, I mean, I think that town center type feel, that commercial core would be good to develop because it gives places for, people to come and gather and not just a strip mall type atmosphere.
Absolutely. So would you want me to fill this area up with commercial?
Yeah, that area, or, I mean, again, it still kind of baffles me how you're going to take that, that parking lot and then turn it into something else without hurting those current businesses, because they're not going to have the same allowable foot traffic.
In some instances, it actually raises the foot traffic of those businesses, especially, if you take on the thinking of draws, how kind of how malls were originally organized with the anchors in either end, and it builds foot traffic for the businesses in between. I've seen for infill development, them actually making a tunnel towards the existing buildings. And so you'll see some type how the buildings are oriented towards 2-4, facing 2-4. The other businesses will actually be facing towards Fox Run Boulevard. And so when you're riding by, you're getting a whole shopping center feel that increases the foot traffic, and what's the word? It multiplies. It's a multiplier.
Oh, no, I am in 100% agreement that we need more commercial establishments in Calvert County to keep people in Calvert County. I mean, the northern end of the county, they can go up to Annapolis and have, 250,000 restaurants, The southern end of the county can go across the bridge to St. Mary's and has, that whole strip of commercial restaurants that they can choose from. There's very little, you've got the 3, standalone restaurants that, can't hold or can't support Calvert County. So, I mean, I'm in 100% agreement that, more commercial needs to come to the area.
I also want to point out how your prior decisions will have an effect of accelerating that. Because you've decided to put more density in this area, you're baking in that foot traffic to these commercial areas that are going to be close by. And so that really helps out and give the density boost to those businesses to survive, because they're going to have a baked in audience that doesn't necessarily have to drive there. They can just walk there.
Can I ask you a question, DeCarlo?
Absolutely.
What's the difference between the neighborhood commercial and the commercial core? I didn't catch that.
Sure. So the commercial core are just straight businesses, and they're in close proximity to each other. So the
on here at all. Again, 765 does not run like this, but
you just plopped it into Armory Square, I think.
Armory is gonna be further north of Dares Beach.
Yep, it's north of that. So, yeah, I think that spot right there would be good for either neighborhood commercial or commercial core. And then as far as Newtown mixed use, either 14 or 24. In behind that along Dares Beach Road would be a good section back towards, the intersection of Main Street and Church Street would be a great location for some mixed use as well.
Would you want to do the higher density or the lower density mixed use?
Lower density.
Yeah, I guess for that section of the town, the lower density. Fine.
Would you like to go this way, this way, this way?
That's the sheriff's office.
Yeah.
Right.
There's a church there too.
Right
The
about
church
there?
is over here.
Mark, is this about is that too big? Because
there's a church right there.
Yeah, there's a church. There's the historical society right there. There's the sheriff's office right there. So it's not really a true depiction of what could be there, but sure.
Correct. But it gives us an idea of what everybody's thinking about as far as what to see in those areas.
I honestly think if you want to make Old Town more viable, more walkable, then that area should be closer to the 24 units per acre. And especially
you got to bring the people down to bring the businesses in.
Correct. Yep.
Yeah. Agreed. So would you want to add some higher density mixed uses closer to the courthouse area in the old downtown?
I think that would be very wise, because then the old house and downtown, the old town and downtown more walkable, more viable, and more poised for redevelopment.
Okay. Where would you like to see it? East or west of Main and north or south of Church?
I would say south of Church.
Okay.
But east or west of Main.
I could do one on each side if you'd like.
Yeah, that would be good.
Just throw 500 new apartments in. No.
And let's see, we're at right now 122 dwelling units.
Yeah, that was only 48 units we added.
Yeah.
Because each block is an acre, correct?
Right about, yep. So yeah, we have about an acre and a half, 2 acres, they're saying. Any additional items?
So Paul, I understand that this is just an exercise, but when they get into realistic, when do they start doing the environmental threat assessments and that type of thing? Because
I don't know what their schedule is going to be for that, Susan.
Okay.
That might, if given the chance, it's a question I could ask for you.
That would
and
be
see
wonderful.
If I can message during the presentation you directly and see if I can get an answer for you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Are there any other areas through here you'd like to look at? I want to unshare this. Well, no, I'm not going to unshare it.
So can I ask one more question, Paul?
Absolutely.
So is this a matter of build it and they will come? Because we have in Fox Run, we have so much empty commercial space right now. So, and with this Newtown mixed use 24 units, that's going to be commercial underneath, and then the 24 units up above. So I'm just curious as to how they propose to fill all this commercial, especially with the Amazon effect.
Yeah, they are definitely having that challenge. And again, I can't speak to that. I'm not sure. I know that there are more commercial buildings being planned for the Fox Run area right now, because we've seen the permits or the concepts come through. So it's not something that's going to happen overnight. I know, at least from looking at Facebook, there's a concern that nobody wants Prince Frederick to become Waldorf. I understand that too.
Which
I know
is
it doesn't answer your question, but kind of what we're seeing right now.
But to answer that question, in order to have viable commercial space, you need demographics and housing. So, for example, when you take into consideration spaces like Fox Run and what type of businesses would relocate to those spaces, most of those businesses, based whether or not they relocate to a specific area based on demographics, often would include a 1 mile radius. And unfortunately, our area does enough demographics to be able to encourage those business franchises to locate in those locations currently.
Yep. And this is also for zoning purposes for what's going to be allowed in a certain area, not necessarily what business would be there.
And at the same time, nobody's going to invest millions of dollars just to build it and then somebody come. I mean, it has to be viable, and being able to have a specific type of density or zoning is the only thing that will allow the space to be viable for development, in those areas, both existing and non-existing.
If I could for a minute, just to go back to the senior housing with the aging population, and we see an uptick.
That could be, plus you're going to have too the new Harriet Elizabeth Brown Center coming off on that back corner. That is where Armory Road meets Dares Beach Road. In there, it'll probably enter and exit off of Fairground.
Is the Harriet Brown building, is that a community use building?
That's the new community center.
Uh-huh. Well then maybe that would be a pretty good place to put some senior housing.
Could well be. You might want it even close. That again, that Dares Beach 2-4 corner. Some of that area might be senior housing because it's close to the shopping.
Yeah.
We're not helping you much, Rachel. Sorry.
I think we're doing pretty good because we've already figured out we're 1,250 units. Or 1,200.
I didn't see the number. Yeah, 1,208.
1,208.
What's that light green? That's the Newtown mixed use?
Senior.
The light green is senior housing.
Oh, okay.
It's also good because it's right near the senior center on the other side.
Right.
So, that's useful as well.
Right. Well, I'm still going to keep harping on the 2-4 corridor getting across it problem. We almost had a major accident with a senior citizen on that corner just a week ago where people had to get out of their cars and physically stop traffic on Route 2 and 4 to save somebody from being hit.
So should I move the senior housing to this side?
I don't know. I'd rather figure out a way to get across Route 2 and 4, but because you've already got a bunch of low density retail. Where you've got your plus sign right now is the parking lot for the shopping center.
Yeah.
That light green above the Safeway.
Or we could, so this is the senior center. We could add more senior housing, like somewhere in this block.
I think that.
Sorry, Rachel, your sound completely broke up then.
There's lots of senior housing already on that side, so having that clustered more is probably good for everybody. If you put it on the right side of Prince Frederick Road, where your cursor is, if you put more senior housing there, it's close to shopping, close to the senior center.
So we've kind of hit close to our target for number of dwelling units. but we didn't really hit on any of the traditional suburban village density in terms of residential or more the commercial uses of commercial core and neighbor commercial. Do you guys have any areas where you feel
isn't that what we've kind of got where the old shopping center is, the old A&P shopping center? Isn't that
Mr. Winship, you're kind of breaking up your audio.
So is yours. I don't know what's going on, Rachel.
Okay.
Sorry.
Apologize about that.
Yeah, no, nothing's changed. I mean, I don't know anything to do.
Oh, well, you're coming in good now.
Maybe I got too far away from the mic, Rachel. I'm sorry. I'm sitting at my desk. I moved like 6 inches, but that seemed to
use.
It could be, but from my perspective, I think the guts and the necessity of a functioning town center is to have something viable in the center of it. And it concerns me that we think about the peripheries of all this, and yet we don't have a viable town center in reality. And I think it starts at the center of the town center.
So I put in some what we're calling neighborhood commercial as opposed to commercial core. Kind of just peppered that in along Main Street. So the idea that, trying to support some of the, help activate some commercial uses along Main Street, as well as introducing some higher density that could then support it by walking to these facilities and making it more of a more active place, throughout the week.
Matthew, this is Christine.
Hi, Christine.
I just had a question about the comment that someone made about development in the center. And I know what I would define as the center of town or the center of Prince Frederick, but it may be a different answer depending on who you ask. And so I was curious exactly where that is.
I think, do you want other people to answer that? Because I think that a lot of people might have different perspective about where is the center of the town center, right?
That's kind of what I was getting at, is it may be a very different answer depending on who you ask. And, we've got some good candidates here, that may be able to answer it for us.
Absolutely. And it sounded, Mr. Phil was leading us in this direction that the older part of the town center is kind of the core or the center or the heart. But I would love to hear others. Where do you think, the core and the center of the town center is located?
Yeah, this is Dave again. I agree with Phil. To me, it's Old Town. It has the potential to be absolutely gorgeous, and especially with the county admin buildings all consolidating in that area. I think it is ripe for some commercial growth in some of the older storefronts there, and maybe refurbishing part of the town center. The concern I have about residential growth near the community college is just road safety on Route 231 and lack of county funds in the future for some of the more expensive improvements that I think would need to be made there. Over.
David, I've jotted that down. So we've got 2 votes for the historic area as the core. Anybody else have some thoughts? What about the Armory site? I know we talked earlier about the importance of that as a public space, but do you envision that as a if not a new center, maybe a different type of center to Prince Frederick?
May not make much difference, perhaps. And I think David was quite right.
Town mixed use, so the pink
with green space in the middle and do that in a couple of places.
Okay, so like up here, for example.
Places.
And it all doesn't have to be, pink. Some of it could be that neighborhood commercial or the commercial core. Do we only want to see mixed use? I guess let's start with mixed use, and we'll see how the dwelling units work out. And if we need to reduce some, then we can do that. And we don't have to fill out this whole board either.
I think I would say that the mixed use, and I know this may sound contrary to what I just said about the density, but I would, like, you're putting it all up in the edge, and that's right across from a massive Toyota thing. I mean, what about if we can work in this area between Prince Frederick and
down here lower
and Route 4, put it in that area. So that's where you actually have a sense of community. Maybe if you, because Prince Frederick, the way it is right now, I mean, they've in all these workshops they've been talking about it being walkable. Nobody's going to walk from Giant, across all those lanes of traffic. I don't think to the library. They're going to drive over there. Okay. So if you have, and I've always thought if you had separate sort of distinct little, almost like residential, slightly mixed use, residential and commercial, smaller structural, but more of a mixed use area so that it is more pleasant. If you're not putting a patio, an eating patio in the middle of a parking lot. So you actually have those green spaces.
So maybe something like this, where we have a mixture of kind of that same density where, we're at the 14 dwelling units per acre, mixed with some mixed use, again, at that same density, and maybe some, purely commercial spaces along with the green spaces. It's kind of your,
I suppose, vision. A little bit more mixed up that way.
Okay. And then maybe we'll remove some of the mixed use on this side. You can see that this is our dwelling unit here. And what would we like to see on the west side of Prince Frederick, as we're sort of getting to the edge or the border of the town center? Is that where we're seeing more single family? Do we still want some kind of density that's greater than that in that 14 range?
I like the single family.
Okay.
What are we up to in terms of density?
Well, let me delete the stuff that you guys didn't say. And we didn't like this up here, right? So let's start from here. Right now we're at 622. So if we put too much of that 14 dwelling unit, we're going to get up there pretty quickly to our 900 to 950 range. So let's add a little bit of single family here. Seems like there's some consensus that the boundaries north and west will have less density.
It would seem reasonable to buffer the environmental areas with the lowest density.
Sure. Great.
By the same token, if we have to put in more of the purely commercial stuff, I would say put it in areas like between, Auto Drive and Stokely, which has already got stuff all there. But I totally agree.
And are we thinking more commercial?
What we're talking about here is a potential plan where that land would be roped in now to the Prince Frederick Town Center and is going to get zoned at some level of density. Mm-hmm. So if it's 4 per acre, if it's 14 per acre and so forth, this is what could happen there. So I think what we should try to be doing is thinking about, okay, what sort of worst case scenario and if we have to have this kind of growth, where do we want it? Mm-hmm. And that's why I was pushing for, the areas where it's already developed. So hope that helps.
Yeah. And I think it's clear through everybody's points that there are areas that are currently undeveloped probably for a reason. Like you were saying here around Stokely. So to kind of focus more so on what's there already, what can be expanded upon. Although, kind of switching gears, something I want to touch on that we kind of haven't mentioned at all yet is senior housing. We have a tab for here. Under some of the concepts that Matthew had described before, he had made
kind of some specific points about inclusion of, it was not this one, of age-restricted housing. Either some of the ideas that they had come up with were either out by the college or up by the hospital. So as far as senior housing where the senior center already is, as far as any age-restricted or senior housing, is there anywhere that anybody has any opinions on where could best be served by additional or expansion of more age-restricted housing?
I think it's a little more positive to put it at the college than at the hospital.
I would agree.
It might be more practical at the hospital, but still, I'm like, oh my God.
I'm also thinking that near where services are, so that it's walkable.
Yeah.
So they're near public transportation, like the county busing system and so forth. So I would say, for example, maybe that area that is, Armory Square, or around there, behind there, closer to the high school, but it seems like it makes sense. There you go.
Oh, that's on a road.
Looks like we're about to get kicked out.
Yeah.
Yes, we are. So I will thank everybody for their input. I will get this sent back to Jamie so it can be pulled up.
All right. Scarlett, how we doing? Just a reminder to the facilitators, if you can hear me, if you could screenshot real quick and email me your map, I can post it for the group to see.
This is Jenny, just looking at our time. We do plan on wrapping up at 8:30, so we've got about 13 minutes.
Yep, we're going to get to 2 or 3 of these, 3 or 4 of them maybe at the most. And if I can open up my email, I will be able to open what you're sending me.
And while we're waiting for you to do that, I would like to thank everyone for joining us this evening, and also to any of the groups that have invited staff to present to you over the last 6 or 8 months. So thank you.
Okay, here we go. I got some. Jenny, you might have to go first here. Here we go. Let's see what we got.
That's mine.
Oh, you can see my email?
Maybe not. I think I'm looking at my own snippet. Sorry.
Say, wow. Okay. All right. I'm about to share my screen.
Okay.
Give me 1 second.
It helps when you close your own screen.
Yeah. We are doing this on the fly, folks. This is planning.
He's really console.
Oh shoot.
Jamie, while you're opening,
I tell you what. I'm gonna do it a little bit differently here. I lost it already. Sorry. This part was not as scripted as it should be. Here we go. Share screen. Screen 1. There we go. Can we see this first group?
That's group 8. That's
you.
That was me. Yeah. So
that's you.
We had a great session, quite the age range. We had a couple of the scouts with us, which is great. My group was very interested in putting housing next to shopping areas and also places like the library, keeping lower density in the old town of Prince Frederick. And as you can see, we added some parkland over on the west side, sort of in the center of Prince Frederick. That center of the screen. And then also sort of a new town mixed use housing, and then shops, perhaps a coffee shop, restaurant over by the college. So you see that pink area over there. Great. One thing, we'd really like to take advantage of the amenity of the stream. So the old Baltimore Drum Point Railroad is on the northeast side. So adding in some single family housing over that way. So I think that's a very quick summation.
Great. Let's see who else just popped up in my email here. Jessica. Was that Jessica and Tamara, was it?
Yes, it was us.
Right. Tell me.
Our group was pretty traditional. We didn't get quite up to our numbers, but we were working on it.
What was your target?
1,100 to 1,150.
All right.
We got to 1057. They looked at the area. We started in the northwest quadrant up by Market Square and Stokely Road area. And they were looking for a more traditional suburban area in there. And also the Newtown mixed use, but mostly senior housing to give them an opportunity to walk to a lot of the medical facilities, the hospital area, and the shopping centers. The Armory Square area, they felt this was a good place for the Newtown mixed use. And we also stuck in a civic center there, and we left that strip in there because they want to see more green area.
I saw that in a bunch. I saw that in a bunch of the groups. You know, they wanted to put the higher density, but they also wanted to leave, you know, a big block in the middle or something for green space, just to make it very clear that that was the plan.
Yes, and they want to see it be more of a civic place where people come and gather. There was a need down at the college where they wanted to see some mixed uses there, such as the traditional suburban, some suburban village, and Newtown mixed use areas. Because they want to bring in workforce housing. They're thinking about students going to the college and expanding that area there.
Great. All right. Great. So let's do two more.
Okay.
Doing this partly sight unseen. Let's see. Okay, Josh, I'm coming to you in a second, Josh Colson.
I'm ready.
That's good. All right, Josh Colson. All right, what do we got?
So we were focusing on the northwest quadrant, which is really west of 2-4 and north of Dares Beach. Same thing as Tamara was saying, where, you know, my group wanted to see some higher density, mixed use, sense of place being established, but also preserving green space with lower density, single family housing, sort of on the west side, you know, bordering green space or protected wetland. As we transition outside the town center.
Great. Let me just see. I'm going to pull up. All right, DeCarlo, I'm coming to you next. Great, Josh. Thanks. So you added in, okay, you definitely added in, you're not opposed to going towards some higher density stuff, but there's got to be good green space with it. So.
Exactly. And you know, not necessarily having to have mixed use to create that sense of space. You know, some places may be purely commercial with green space to create that sense of space, but sense of place. But that was definitely the common theme.
All right. Let's see. All right, DeCarlo, and then I think we're going to have to wrap up. And but we'll do Rachel real quick. Let's see. That's Paul. Sorry. DeCarlo. All right. Quite the artistry here, DeCarlo. What do you guys got?
Hi. So our group actually started looking at the commercial areas near Fox Run and adding in some of the residential uses as well. We really wanted to think about the senior housing near the hospital, but also having that higher mixed use near the existing commercial to really build in that more of the availability for that commercial area. And then we wanted to go across the street, leave some room for these natural areas for public spaces, but also build in, there was a really, really big need for housing push in my group and to build that up within the core of Prince Frederick. So that's what we went towards. And I think we actually ran up to our limit because there was a very big want to have even more density, but not necessarily in this northern area, but to go towards the south. But they saw very quickly how we reached our 1,100 limit. So we stayed within our bounds.
And I actually think that's my big, one of my two big takeaways from this is that even when you build more densely, the market isn't going to bear thousands of units. right? You can only, absent some major economic generator, the base doubling in size again, like it did 20 odd years ago, right? There's not a huge development push to get you to 2,000, 5,000 units over the next 20 years. You're probably looking in the 1,000 to 1,200 range, which if you think about it is, what is that, about maybe 60 or 70 new residences per year over the next 20 years, kind of on average. So, you're not likely to get massive growth. And in fact, you're going to end up leaving a lot of undeveloped land throughout the town center, which I think is part of what people want to see, right? So let me then just switch out of all of this, not show you all my personal stuff. Okay. How do I just stop that share? Go to the screen sharing again. Go to this one. Okay. Jenny.
Yes.
It's all you.
All right. I think we have a few slides left, and so you could share your screen.
I thought I was. Here we go.
You're not. We see you.
There we
Thank
go.
you. So for the update process, the next step will be for staff to prepare the first draft, as I mentioned earlier. We'll make that draft available for public review. We'll do public meetings to give an overview of it. Planning Commission will review those comments, and then we'll prepare the second draft based upon the Planning Commission's review of public comments. And then the public will be given an opportunity for that review of that second draft. So we are nowhere near finished, but we are in this phase where we're in right here in February. We will have another meeting to talk more about land use and transportation. That meeting is scheduled for March 31st. It will not be a workshop like this, but it will be sharing the ideas that you have shared tonight, and then moving forward to those elements that will be in the plan. Looking forward, the preferred scenarios, that's what we've worked on tonight, is kind of narrowing down the focus. I'm working with other departments on other elements like recreation, public facilities, that type, and then looking at May, June into that timeframe for public review of the draft. Jamie, if I could turn it back to you, any closing thoughts?
Any parting thoughts?
And
no.
Then we'll turn it over to Steve. So go ahead.
Yep. No, I think that was great participation. I know the exercise was a little abstract at first, but I think you got into it. I think, I hope that you saw that, there was still lots of opportunity for land preservation, for incorporating those high quality green spaces, even with some amount of density that might be higher than usual in the town center. And that, we can find compromises that get to the type of community that we say that we envision. It sometimes just takes a little bit to get there. So I think that is the point at which we will turn it over to Chairman Jones, wherever he went.
Right here, sir. Thank you, Jamie.
There he is. All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. So folks, first of all, thanks to everybody. I want to thank all of the staff. You guys did a fantastic job, but I'll say thank you to Mary Beth Cook, the director, and if you could pass on my sentiments to everybody, we greatly appreciate all the hard work. I know if I start naming names, I'm going to forget somebody. I will. So, technology services. I said this last time, folks. If it wasn't for technology services, we would not be able to have input from you in this fashion. So I thank them greatly. The most important part of this tonight, in my opinion, is the public participation. Without you, we wouldn't be getting the feedback. And I'm not going to take questions on this, but I heard a question tonight, and the question was about retail stores being empty and new stores being built. That's a question that needs to be answered because I think it is a problem in Calvert County. So I guess my point in bringing that up, I think, Paul, you fielded that question. The point in me bringing that up is we do listen to you. We are hearing what you say, and we want to come up with solutions to problems. So thank you so much for your participation. As Jenny stated, the next Prince Frederick Town Center Master Plan virtual public meeting is scheduled for 7 p.m. On Wednesday, March 31st. And that will be at calvertcountymd.gov/town center update. God bless you all. Thank you all for being here. And that concludes our meeting for tonight. Thank you.